Hello, this is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Teen News. Hello. Welcome to Black Teen News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today I want to talk about an interview with Bill Barr on CNN where he talked about how he was still going to support the Republican ticket. And there's some Democrats baffled by it because he's had some really harsh criticisms for Trump. And Trump has in turn had some harsh criticisms for Barr. And there was this one kid on TikTok named Harry Sisson. He was like, he's a coward. I'm like, how is he a coward? He just explained that he thinks that in the end, Biden will do more damage to the country. And that's a conversation worth having. But there's the logic. You have to, he made a claim, and then you have to discuss the claim. Do not pretend like he's just so scared and it's his integrity that's keeping him from doing the right thing and voting for Joe Biden. No, that's not how it works. Also, Washington Post did a fact check on a story about in Michigan how there's illegal immigrants who having their rent paid, and so Trump is going around and different people, MAGA people, saying that Biden is paying for their rent. And the fact they gave Trump and the MAGA people 4 Pinocchios for something that's like true, that they pretty much admit is true, but the way they go about saying that it's false is pretty hilarious. So we'll be talking about that. And also a bishop who was attacked in Australia by a radical Muslim young man. He came back and actually, said that he was praying for the man. But it turns out that because of this attack, I guess he jumped the gun. They ended up being able to connect the boy with a plot with some other friends where they were going to buy a bunch of firearms from the black market and go kill a bunch of Jews. So even though this terrible thing happened, at least this plot was uncovered. So anyway, before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blackteennews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blackteennews.com/donate, because it does cost to stream from my website, all that stuff you guys can support. I appreciate it. You guys can also give stars if you're watching on Facebook and on YouTube. You guys can do super chats or super thanks if you're watching back later. You guys can check out different merch available at blackteennews.com, like this cool "I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For" t-shirt. I also have different books you guys can check out. I have 17 that are published altogether. Most of them are, all but 2 are fiction. The rest 2 are nonfiction. One of my nonfiction books is, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. So I encourage you guys to check out that book and my many others. Another nonfiction one is Slay Your Fear, How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear, which it's not about COVID, but I certainly was inspired to write it during COVID because people had lost their minds. I'm sure you guys remember. So yeah, that's what prompted me to write that one. And the rest are like historical fiction, contemporary fiction, fantasy, romance, action, adventure, all kinds of stuff. I just write whatever I feel like writing, to be frank. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I had a good weekend as always. My nephew was so excited to watch like the Knuckles TV show, and then he only wanted to watch like 2 episodes and then play Minecraft. Kids are so fickle, man. They're so fickle. I haven't watched it yet myself, but it looked like there were too many humans in there. Anyway, let's hop to it. So first thing I want to start with is this interview with Caitlin Collins on CNN. I don't think the whole thing is like 10 minutes long, so I don't think that we'll watch the whole thing together, but there's snippets of this going around on TikTok, and the reaction from people is pretty funny. As I already said, there's this kid named Harry Sisson who is paid through an agency that's paid through the Democrats. He's like he's an influencer for the Democrats, basically a shill for them. And so he's like, look at what they said, and he played some of the interview, and he's like, these cowards, he's a coward. And I'm like, how is he a coward? He plainly explains that he thinks that Biden is worse for the country overall than Trump. So I'm gonna go ahead and play some of this clip. Sometimes Caitlyn is fine, other times, she's a bit of a joke, but let's watch some of this together.
He responded in response to you saying you'd vote for the Republican ticket.
Oh,
Wow, former AG Bill Barr, who led a lot of great.
Let me just replay
he
that.
responded in response to you saying you'd vote for the Republican ticket. Wow, former AG Bill Barr, who led a lot of great people down by not investigating voter fraud in our country, has just endorsed me for president, despite the fact that I called him weak, slow-moving, lethargic, gutless, and lazy. Based on the fact that I greatly appreciate his wholehearted endorsement, I am removing the word lethargic from my statement. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah. Classic Trump. What's the question?
What's your response?
First of all, I got to say, there's an adult in the room. It's totally Bill here. He's like, yeah, I know how Trump is. I know who he is. It's very classic Trump. Trump's comments. He's funny. Trump is funny. Even Bill just kind of laughed at it himself. Like, what can you do? I mean, you can get mad about it, but it's whatever. I wish Trump would stop doing stuff like that, though. There are folks who maybe don't want to come over, but are willing to come over and hold their nose and vote for him, who may not necessarily like him. And then he does stuff like that. And it's a continuous, unnecessary, I don't know, flex. Like, I don't have to be better because I'm your only option. And I suppose that's true, but I just ask why. I just ask why make statements like that. You could just, be like, thank you. He understands that even though we have our differences, Joe Biden is obviously a bigger threat is a threat to the country, and we need to turn things around, and things were better when I was president. And that's the kind of statement that you could make instead of, playing the greatest hits of all the negative things that you said about a person. So he shrugs it off. And so Caitlyn here, it has a silly response. Like, what was your response?
Well, I mean, obviously what I said was that I'm very disappointed that this country is stuck with this choice between two people who I don't think either of them should be president of the United States. But given that binary choice, I feel I have to choose Trump.
But he's mocking you.
So it's not about me. I think that I've said this all along. If faced with a choice between two people, neither of which I think should be president, I feel it's my duty to pick the person who I think would do the least damage to the country. And I think Trump would do less damage than Biden. And I think all this stuff about a threat to democracy, I think the real threat to democracy is the progressive movement and the Biden administration.
So that's the snippet that is going around on TikTok. And we can watch a little bit more, but that's the gist of it that I want to show and discuss, since that's what the portion that people are discussing. And then that kid Harry, that's when he's like, he's a coward. Like, no, he plainly told you that he doesn't like either option. He doesn't like being in this position, but it's a binary choice. And for Caitlyn to go, but he said mean things about you, and his response is, so it's not about me. It's about the greater good of the country, and he feels he has a duty to do the right thing. Period. And the right thing, and with this binary choice, according to him, is to support Trump because he feels that Biden and the progressive left are a far greater threat to the country. There's things about Trump and Biden, if you compare side by side, both dings in their columns for sure. Like, Trump, Trump is mean. You don't think Biden is mean? And Trump has mean tweets. Biden has embraced this whole like dark Brandon sort of silly tweets. Trump is divisive. Biden will get up and talk about half the country and these MAGA Republicans, and some people are kooky, but they'll include MAGA people if you just don't believe in killing babies. Like, oh, these MAGA Republicans, and that blood red speech that he gave. He's extraordinarily divisive, and then he'll lie to create more division, cutting campaign ads with Trump and the his recent comments that he said at a rally, trying to cut it up and make it seem like he's just a massive white supremacist, and then cutting up stuff from the Charlottesville stuff as if he didn't say, as if he didn't condemn the neo-Nazis in his video where they're taking the very fine people comments from. So they're evil. Biden's a liar. His team is a team of liars who's willing to divide the country to take a W. Like, oh, Trump's mean to the press. He's aggressive with the press. You don't think Biden isn't aggressive with the press? Let's call Peter Doocy, get his 2 cents in there. If you are going to ask real questions that he doesn't like, you're going to get some pushback from Biden. You're going to get some pushback from Biden. Trump's too old. Well, I know, Biden is too old. Biden is way too old. I think they're both too old, but we know Biden is way not there. Well, Trump spent a lot of money. Biden spent, inflation is on both of them. And I don't expect Trump to not spend a lot of money when he becomes president, to be frank. But when you get to things like foreign policy, who would you rather have in charge? When you look at the border, who handled it more competently? Biden obviously wants the border open. I can't do it. They're not passing the bipartisan bill. You didn't need a bipartisan bill to get rid of Remain in Mexico. And, you could brag on Trump for not doing more long-lasting things for the border. And I don't know how many long-lasting things he can do to solve the problem, but he can at least slow it up, halt it a bit, and get control of the border, as opposed to the drug cartels who have drones flying across our border monitoring it. So when it comes to protecting our border, who are you going to trust? When it comes to the subject of abortion that Biden likes to bring up a lot, to me, they're not too different, actually. But who's more moderate? You could say Trump on the issue. Trump isn't as far, well, I don't know if you want to say it right, he's not morally correct on the issue, but I guess you could say he's a little less egregious than Biden. So, Rick, we needed to vote for Biden for abortion access. Trump is not fighting that hard to endure abortion access. Not hard enough. Not hard enough. So what's your pitch on the left? What's your pitch? Unless you just like the country being worse. You like your higher gas? You like them using the tapping into the sources and our emergency supply and not even like refilling them? You like all that stuff? I don't. So if Barr's saying that one is a threat to democracy, you can be mad about the election stuff. And there's a lot of people who, still look at it through the eyes and lens of Trump and how they told the story about what happened election night. But you can not like how Trump handled all that stuff and what rippled out afterwards. But Biden will be shot down by the Supreme Court and say, hey, what you're doing is unconstitutional. And then he will brag about ignoring the Supreme Court. So we have someone who is in a co-equal branch of government who says, I don't care. I'm going to do what I want. Because he wants to bribe his constituents. I think that's pretty messed up. I think if you've watched some of these confirmation hearings with some of his judicial picks, oh boy. Oh boy. If you want to talk about a threat to democracy, do you recall during COVID when Biden said this isn't about your choice or your personal freedom? I do. When he wanted to violate people's liberties and coerce people to get jabbed, even though it wouldn't stop other people from catching the virus. And he did that unconstitutional OSHA mandate. They had to be shot down. I recall that stuff. I was watching it very closely because I had family who were very concerned about keeping their jobs. So I haven't forgotten that. Not in the slightest. So people pretending that Trump is such a big threat and as if their side is all innocent. I recall when Trump won in 2016 and people lost their minds and they couldn't accept the results of the election. I had to participate in the recount in Michigan. And that was really annoying because that was supposed to be my vacation. Oh gosh, it was annoying. But they couldn't accept the results of that election. I was at the inauguration and the inaugural ball where people still couldn't accept the results of the election. There were people protesting. There were people rioting that day, attacking people in line. And me and my sisters thought we were going to have to fight in our ball gowns and high-heeled shoes. And I could have used them as a weapon if I needed to, man. We were just like, well, we're from Pontiac, and it's called Yaktown for some reason. Well, Pontiac, I guess. That would make sense. Yeah, but Yaktown, don't back down. That's a saying. So we're ready to go if we needed to. Need be. Come on. But, of course we didn't really want to. We wanted to go to the ball. And nothing ended up happening to us. But they were attacking people. And there were more like protesters who showed up after we were inside. I had the good sort of knowledge and foresight to say, hey, we should go there early and get in line early because I didn't know how long the line would be. So I'm like, let's leave early. And I also, at the inauguration, I was like, let's leave a little early because, well, one, my feet was really cold and sore and numb at the same time. And once Trump got toward the end of his speech, I'm like, okay, I've been to enough rallies. I know what he's pretty much going to say. It's okay. We can leave now. And so by the time we got back, we were like watching crazy stuff that happened on the street. So I didn't forget that they couldn't accept the results of the election in 2016. Joe Biden allegedly was the one who wanted to use like the Logan Act against gosh, where's it, Flynn? Somebody on the Trump administration. You had people in the Obama administration, which Joe Biden was a part of, mind you, who were undermining the incoming administration. And now they basically reinstalled themselves. You don't think that's an issue? You don't think that's possibly a threat to democracy? You don't think standing on a debate stage, lying about your son's laptop and peddling the idea that the Russian government was interfering with our election, a nuclear power, when it was just your crackhead son left his crackhead laptop at a shop and made a boo-boo and embarrassed you all. And then you had to lie about it to the American people and get a bunch of intelligence people together, former folks or whoever, experts, to peddle ridiculousness. Isn't it a threat to democracy that people are willing to embarrass themselves like that for you? I'm so sick of this rhetoric. You could not like either of them. That's cool. But to sit up and just pretend like it's just a one-way thing with Trump being so bad is insane. It's insane. You don't think the suppression of speech online with the COVID stuff, or which, granted, that stuff was happening under Trump too. But the Biden White House coordinating with them, or the Biden White House coordinating with the American Library Association to try to use like the Patriot Act on parents when they went to these school board meetings, upset about this gender ideology stuff and these disgusting books in the libraries. You don't think that's a threat to democracy? What they're willing to do to stop Trump is scary. You can not like Trump, but the means that people are willing to take to stop him is a far bigger threat than him. So if everybody could just act right and actually run on their record, which Biden's is trash, so I understand why he doesn't want to. So they want to run on hysteria instead. But if people could just play it straight, at least you could respect people. If they could just play the game straight and not lie to your face. Even if you might not like someone, even if you don't like their policies, if you could just be honest with the American people, I'd appreciate that. But this childish, he said mean things about you. Yeah, and you allowed your trash president to be the nominee again when he told you all the first time he ran that he was going to be placeholder candidate. That's what he said. And he ran again. Didn't allow anyone else to get the chance. I started listening to RFK's interview with Ben Shapiro, and I'm probably going to react to some of it later because I know they well, I'm interested in all the things he was going to say in that interview, but I know they talk about abortion for a little bit. But he was running as a Democrat at first, and then he realized there's no point. They weren't going to allow a primary. And that wasn't a secret. They talked about it in different news programs, like the DNC is not going to run a primary. They're not going to have debates. And so he's like, so I ran as an independent. And now Biden and Trump are both scared to death about how he'll pull votes from the both of them. And I don't know who he pulls more from. If Trump was more willing to be humble about the vaccine stuff and COVID, then, he'd probably, not lose as many people to RFK. If he was a bit more humble, well, a little bit humble. He hasn't been even a little bit humble. If he was just humble about it and people felt like there was going to be some accountability somewhere, RFK would be a far less greater threat than he is right now. And he is apparently a threat because Trump is attacking him. Seems like over Biden, to be frank. And Biden has all the candidates getting together to try to take down him. And I don't want to, I don't like his policies either. And even some of the ones that he's softer on, I'm like, there's videos not too long ago about you trashing guns and other stuff like that. So I can't, forgive me if I'm suspicious about your more sort of moderate take on this stuff. Though I can appreciate, someone wanting to get to the bottom of this vaccine stuff. Yeah, Joe Biden he obviously isn't good for the country. And I don't know why it's so hard to understand that. I want to play a little bit more just to see what else she adds to that.
The Biden administration or President Biden himself?
Biden's support for the progressive agenda.
I think a lot of people hear that, and the case that we just talked about that went before the Supreme Court essentially, and say, how can you see that and say that Biden is a greater threat to democracy?
Well, where are we losing our freedoms? How are our freedoms being constrained? They're being constrained by the progressive government. And, democracy, especially, from the Anglosphere democracies, the Five Eyes and so forth, the threat's never been for autocratic government on the right.
But how specifically is Biden threatening democracy?
The threat to freedom and democracy has always been on the left. It's the collectivist, socialist agenda. And that is where we're losing our freedom. Parents are losing the freedom to control their children's education. People can't speak their mind without losing their jobs and things like that. This is worse than the McCarthy era. Where is that coming from? It's not coming from the right.
Those two things that you just noted there, you believe are worse than a president of the United States trying to subvert the will of the people by overturning the results of the election?
I think a country, all the things together, like we're not enforcing our borders. We have open borders. We have lawlessness in our cities. We have regulations coming fast and furious, so telling people what kind of stoves they can use and what kinds of cars they have to drive, and eliminating cars and so forth. Those are the threats to democracy.
But President Biden is not in control of what some school boards across the country are doing.
He's using the administrative
argument, but how is that the same thing?
Major changes are being made in our country without the democratic process, and they're being made by bureaucrats in these agencies.
Pause. You cannot argue that Republicans across the country are not doing that as well. In my own hometown, there's a huge fight at the library over which books kids can read. This is not something that is a single party fight.
Do you think don't you think there should be some limits on what people are able to read at very young ages?
I just think people look at what you're saying and they don't, and maybe even Republicans who have concerns about.
Yeah, we don't want gay sex or any kind of sex in the orgies and other kind of stuff in the books. We don't want books like this book is gay and gender queer and in the children's books in the library. Sorry, Caitlin, that's just not not the same. As parents fearing that they'll lose custody of their kids if they won't inject them with sterilizing drugs. I'm sorry, it's just kind of not the same. Or if a dad is at a school board meeting upset because his daughter was sexually assaulted in the bathroom and the superintendent, lies and says that kind of stuff isn't happening, that he gets upset and the police, drag him away. And then his face and his shirt up and his belly hanging out, looking all embarrassed, ends up in the news and TV. And then a portion, headlines from that incident makes it in the coordinated efforts from the National School Board Association. And by the way, not everybody on the board was down with it. It was a couple people. I wrote about this at blacktnews.com at the time, and the White House coordinating to use the Patriot Act. I already mentioned this, to try to silence these parents. So he's right that you have these bureaucrats within the Biden administration that are a terror, that are a threat to democracy. And they keep going back to January 7th and Donald Trump and the efforts to subvert the will of the American people. I already mentioned my memory's fresh on 2016. I know it was forever ago in politic years. But and to think that these people also had Stacey Abrams on all the time and to promote her, even though she used to pretend like she was the governor of Georgia and it was stolen from her, et cetera, et cetera. These people like election denial as well, but they're trying to also subvert the will of American people through multiple things that they do, including the suppression of free speech, the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop and other things like that. they're trying to make sure that the electorate isn't properly informed so they can emotionally manipulate them into making the decision that they want them to make, you know? But Bill Barr mentioned a couple things that are going on in real life that are impacting people. And she's talking about something that failed. You can say that what Trump did wasn't good, but we have a system that was strong enough to still block him. That's the thing about Biden v. Trump. The thing about Biden v. Trump is that at the end of the day, maybe Trump's like voters won't hold him accountable, but everything together still holds him accountable. There's a press that is relentless about everything he does. If he puts ketchup on a steak, there's a story about it. If he feeds the koi fish wrong, there's a story about it. If he walks in front of the Queen of England, there's a story about it. If he's afraid of stairs, there's a story about it. I'm telling you real things, by the way. These aren't jokes. These are things where there are actually stories about all this stuff with Trump nonstop. If he has a phone call, there's a story about it. Gonna get impeached for the phone call. So there's things in place to block him, to stop him. There's a balance of power. Okay? Joe Biden, the Supreme Court will say, hey, you can't do this thing with student loans. He just says, watch me. Or he watch me. And he just whispers into the microphone and plans to do it anyway. Joe Biden lies all day long. And the fact checkers, they don't feel like they need the same passion to fact check Biden the way they fact check Trump, because they felt that Trump was a bigger threat to democracy. Well, if you're going to be slacking with these people, aren't you kind of helping to create that threat though? Because the biggest issue with Biden, or one of them is at least, or one that is humongous, is the fact that he just thinks he can get away with stuff. And maybe the issue here is you have two old men who you can't tell them nothing because they've lived their life majorly without big consequences, you know. And now they're head to head again. But there's a whole system that's willing to keep Trump in check. But here comes Joe Biden making changes to Title IX, making it so that the boys, if they want to go in the girls' locker room, they get to go there. That if the boys wants to play on the sports team, they get to do that. If there's a girl on college campus that says that your son did something and he didn't do something, he's not going to have too much protection. And his whole career might be over before the law can even really get involved and look into whether he's guilty or not. So Biden is an issue. Now, if people, again, were fair, and if Biden really respected the co-equal branches of government, if there wasn't this top-down executive order attitude that he has, you know, if the media were on their jobs and were real journalists, you know, maybe that wouldn't be the case. But of course he's a threat. Of course he's a threat.
What's happening with school boards, or, you know, the culture, and don't, maybe abortion even, don't equate that with January 6th and Trump's efforts. When you told him the election was not stolen, and he still went out there and said it was stolen and led a lot of people to believe that. Those things aren't equal. It feels like a false equivalency.
Well, I disagree. I think uh, the country is much more susceptible to losing freedoms by the excesses of the left than they have been steadily, and that's clear. People lose their jobs. Kids can't speak out in the classroom. They have to go along with what the professor says in order to get good grades and so forth.
Well,
It's become like a
Republicans are also
Stepford
trying-
nation being directed by the progressive elites.
Republicans are also trying to limit what could be said in the classroom. But I do want to ask you, because you're a lifelong Republican, I don't think it's a surprise that you don't like those issues that a lot of Republicans blame on Democrats. I think there's a question of how they're the same. But I want you to listen to what another lifelong Republican, Liz Cheney, said about your decision to vote for the Republican ticket in November.
Given what Bill Barr has said publicly about Trump's lack of fitness for office, I think that his assertion now that he's actually going to support Trump for office is indefensible, and was frankly disappointing to see.
She says it's indefensible.
Well, that's her view. That's her view. The fact of the matter is, as I said all along, I agreed with Trump's policies. And despite the media, the left-wing media's effort to portray it as a lawless administration, it wasn't. His policies were sound, and we had victories in courts, and we defended them. I think that Biden is unfit for office.
So you're basically saying that you are voting because you want the Republican policies.
Well, that's certainly part of it.
Well, I'm glad.
Duh! Oh my gosh! Why else would you vote for someone? I haven't seen this part of the interview. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You dumb broad. I'm sorry to be so disrespectful, but I just had to call that as I see it. Oh my gosh. Yes, you vote for the policies. Yes. Yes. There are people who didn't like Trump in 2016, but hoped that he would implement some policies that they liked. Who likes Biden for real? Who likes Biden for real? There might be some people who kind of personally like him, who know him, but just kind of out in the wild. People like, yeah, I like Joe. For what? For what? Why? Y'all just, he's a Democrat. There's a D next to his name, and you don't want the Republican to win. It's like the conversation The Rock had on was it Joe Rogan? And they're like, nah, I don't know anybody who's voting for Biden. They're playing for the team. They're playing because of policies, right? Or policies, or perceived policies, or whatever. When January, I'm sorry, I think I said the 7th earlier. January 6th happened. There were people who were texting, who were, from Fox and other places, or within like Trump's team, and like they, or even before that, prior to that, who were just like, we want to. A good move would be to kind of preserve the legacy, to like shift the focus there. That's obviously not what Trump wanted to do. That's obviously not the route that his team went. Okay. But people overall liked a lot of things that happened with his administration. And so a lot of times people will talk about the Trump administration for the 3 years he was in office and kind of be like, well, COVID was such a thing that happened. I think you got to hold him accountable for all of them and the stuff that happened within it. And he definitely made some mistakes. He didn't do everything perfect. And those are things to consider, and those are things to talk about. Like a lot of this election stuff that happened with the drop boxes, he signed legislation that funded that stuff. But they were just so quick to fire hose money everywhere, that it didn't work out too well for him. And he basically authored his own demise as soon as, 15 days to slow the spread, and they started shutting down the country. And you can say, well, no, they made a choice that everybody could decide on the state level. Trump wanted people to shut down. And he pressured Georgia and Florida and other states if they were opening too early. So he made some mistakes. He wasn't perfect. Overall, most people think that I would say probably think that it was better before than it is right now. And there was some Trump is a wild man and really needs the right kind of people around him. I'm concerned about the sort of people who may be around him when assuming that he wins. That's a concern. You know, if you're a person who believes in the power of prayer, pray that the right people are around him and good policy decisions are made and he listens to wise counsel. But overall there was a lot of good stuff that happened. But yeah, you support the policies, you dumb broad. I'm sorry.
Because you told Geraldo Rivera last year, you may want his policies, but Trump will not deliver Trump policies. He will deliver chaos and, if anything, lead to a backlash that will set his policies much further back than they would otherwise be. You're even acknowledging he can't accomplish those Republican policies.
What I was saying was, if you want Trump's policies, if you're MAGA and want to make America great again, the other candidates will be successful at that much more than he will.
But
for the reasons
not the other
I stated.
It's going to be Donald Trump.
That's right. I'm certainly not going to get anywhere near what I'd like under Biden. And Biden is not a great moral exemplar. Okay. And is he following the laws? Here he is giving away another round of forgiving student loans after he lost it in the Supreme Court, and he thinks he can get away. And he thinks he can get away with it by getting it out the door before the election. But he's not enforcing the law.
Shut up.
But those are policy differences that you disagree with. Trump, I remember also.
No, he just said he broke the law
in the spring of 2019. So the idea that border chaos only happens under this administration.
Everybody knows it's worse.
No, wait a minute. We had it under control because we had a program approved by the Supreme Court called Remain in Mexico that was fully lawful and had shut down the border, and he came in and lifted it.
How can you equate? The border is a real issue. I've been to the border. No one's denying that. But is that the same thing as what you said recently, which was that, the conduct that was involved with Donald Trump? You said trying to subvert and prevent the progress, the execution of probably the most important process we have, which is the peaceful transfer of power after an election. Name one thing that Biden has done that's worse than that.
I think his whole administration is a disaster for the country.
Is worse than subverting the peaceful transfer of power?
Did he succeed?
Only because Vice President Mike Pence stood in the way, and now the people who are lining up to be VP again say that they will not do what Mike Pence did.
I mean, look, I was very loud and saying I thought it was the whole episode was shameful, and I'm very troubled by it, and that's why it's not an easy decision. But I think when you have a Hobson's choice, you have to pick the lesser of two evils.
You don't see this as the definition of putting party over country?
No.
No, not because unfortunately we're in a situation where the policy differences between the two parties are very, very vast. There's a huge gulf, and so in that
you're saying Trump can't achieve the policies.
I think he's going to have a much harder time achieving them.
But you're voting for So just to be clear, you're voting for someone who you believe tried to subvert the peaceful transfer of power, that can't even achieve his own policies, that lied about the election even after his attorney general told him that the election wasn't stolen. And as the former chief law enforcement in this country, you're going to vote for someone who is facing 88 criminal counts.
Well, look, the 88 criminal counts, a lot of those are, and I've said—
Even if 10 of them are accurate.
The answer to the question is yes. I'm supporting the Republican ticket.
But can you say that you're voting for Donald Trump? Because you're not saying his name. You just say you're supporting the Republican ticket.
I've said as between Biden and Trump, I will vote for Trump, because I believe he will do less damage over the 4 years. I believe we're facing the most dangerous situation we've ever faced in the world. A lot of it invited by Biden's weakness. And to have Biden out there for the next 4 years, given all the threats we face, including handing the keys to the nuclear weapon to Iran, with a vice president like Kamala Harris, endangers the country. That alone should be reason to vote for the Republican ticket. But there are a host of other reasons. Our country is unraveling in many ways. The rule of law is unraveling.
So you want to put someone back in the position with immense power who you believe disrespects the rule of law?
Well, no, I think he will enforce the law, and we'll have greater safety in our cities.
He already told you how Biden just blatantly disrespected the ruling of the Supreme Court to do the student loan stuff. I already mentioned that he was willing to blame a nuclear power on his crackhead son's laptop. Um, they do what they can get away with. Like, Trump's plan wasn't great, and people told him that it wasn't great. Now, I don't know. I haven't heard anybody, including people who flipped on him thus far, give any sort of definitive, yeah, Trump absolutely knew that he lost the election, but decided to pursue it anyway. So I don't know, but people did tell him that he did lose it. Whether he acknowledged that or accepted that, I don't know if there's any evidence to that statement. But I didn't like the stuff that went down from, the election on to like Jan 6, etc. And I guess since then, myself. But the Democrats, they lose, and they don't really accept that they lose though. But they will just plan to they just plan they're playing a totally different game. As I said, when Donald Trump won in 2016, the Obama administration was undermining the incoming administration. And the Obama administration included who? Who is the president right now? Obama's vice president. And plenty of people from the Obama administration came into the Biden administration. Jen Psaki, for example, was one of those people who was a holdover or whatever. So they came in sabotaging Trump a bit. What about the Russia collusion hoax? You had someone a democratically elected president who won fair and square. And there was this enormous hoax that was pushed to undermine the legitimacy of the presidency. You don't think that wasn't dangerous? You don't think that wasn't dangerous? You don't think that didn't do enormous damage, not just to Trump, but to the country? These delusional people spreading that rhetoric time and time and time again. Journalists spreading these stories, getting awards, patting themselves on the back. In the Democrat Party platform, they tell you straight up they don't believe that our laws should be neutral as far as race goes. You don't think that's dangerous? You don't think that's dangerous? Anyway, that's the video. I guess it was probably longer than the 9 minutes, but that was the whole clip that she posted on her Twitter. Gosh. Anyway, showing an example of the ridiculousness of the media, there was a fact check from the Washington Post, because Trump and his allies are saying that Biden is paying rent for illegals in Michigan. And Glenn Klesser wrote that wasn't true. So in his fact check, let me tell you some of the things about his fact check here. Let's just read some highlights. The federal government, through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, a unit of the Department of Health and Human Services, has long provided hundreds of millions of dollars a year to states and non-government organizations to help refugees transition to life in the United States. The Office of Global Michigan supports such efforts in the state, and in October launched the Newcomer Rental Subsidy Program. Under this initiative, for up to 12 months, individuals who qualify may receive as much as $500 a month in rental subsidies. Okay? The link to Biden is even more dubious. This is a state program that has received federal grant money. But there is no indication that Biden is even aware of it. So it's absurd to run ads that claim Biden is paying rent for immigrants who are in the country illegally. Okay. And they gave that 4 Pinocchios. They didn't even like give it 2 or kind of true or whatever. 4 whole Pinocchios. Even though the federal money is paying for it. The administration is paying for it. But we get to give it 4 Pinocchios because you don't know if the zombie President Biden, who has the borders like wide open, you don't know if he's aware that they're using the funds in this way. And you gave it 4 Pinocchios. That's our media. That is our media right now. Stephen Miller said, in this fact check, Kessler admits that the claim of the federal funds through admits the claim of federal funds through HHS to states for illegal migrants is true, admits it's used for dubious foreign asylum claims, says the claim is false because the guy in charge of the executive branch, the president, might be oblivious to it. So it's all false. That's our media. That's our media that's supposed to hold the president accountable. I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem for the Washington Post, where democracy dies in darkness. I think our whole country is sick. And it's been that way for a long time. And I don't know, I don't know how to fix it, at least not immediately. I keep saying I'm glad I'm a Christian. My faith is in Christ. My faith is in Christ. And hopefully, we keep talking, and hopefully you have conversations and people wake up to the madness and do something about it. But the journalists are just the journalists, They're just the worst. Anyway, there was this 2 weeks ago, I believe there was an attack in Australia, and there was a Bishop Mar Emanuel was attacked by this young man who was a Muslim terrorist, and some like Muslim influencers, or I don't know if they're all Muslim influencers, but like Andrew Tate and someone else had posted stuff like blaming Jews for the attack for some reason. Strange, but no, it was a Muslim terrorist, and he came back the other day to give a sermon. He had a standing ovation from the people. He lost an eye, but it turns out that because of the attack, they were able to find out that this young man was associated with a group of other young men who are planning on buying guns, which you can't really get guns in Australia, that easily, but they have a black market, and they were going to obtain some guns and then apparently plan an attack and kill a lot of Jews. And so my youngest sister called me this morning to talk about it. She watched a video that David Wood, he's an apologist, who talked about it, and his video. And she just mentioned, well, when she started talking about, the fact that he was attacked, but because he was attacked, they were able to uncover this plot. And I'm like, man, sometimes what you gotta endure for the greater good. And like immediately that's where our minds went to. Like, we don't want to suffer. Obviously you don't want to get attacked. Obviously you don't want to get stabbed. And that was a horrible thing that happened. But at the same time, because this evil person decided to do that thing, at least the other plots were uncovered, and he lost an eye, but he does still have his life, and other people didn't lose their life. And these young men were willing to be martyrs. So even their lives were potentially saved after this act and them being caught. She was, mentioning how Joseph, when he was, his brothers put him off, sold him to slavery, and he went through all this drama and ended up, being Pharaoh's, like number one guy. And then he was reunited with his family, and he had like an emotional moment with his brothers. And he said, you guys meant this thing for evil, but, God meant it for good, because there was a great famine that came throughout the land, and he was later in a position where he could save his family's life. And if he weren't in that position, then they could have died. So I guess it was a horrific thing. I don't want to show you guys the video of him being stabbed, but if you didn't see it, I mean, it happened while it was like live streaming. So it was a pretty terrible thing to witness. There's a lot of Christians around the world who are being attacked, especially in Nigeria, all over the place. And pray for the Christians around the world. But I am grateful that this attack was thwarted, and that this man's spirit. Now I don't know anything about this man other than this attack. But he did say that he was praying for his attacker, and that he wanted him to come to Christ. So he didn't come out in the church and have harsh words or anything, he wouldn't curse him out or something at church, I would think, but his reaction was a very Christian reaction, was a very super save reaction. So just wanted to report that. David Wood had a really good video on it. If we're not familiar with David Wood, he's a remarkable story. His story, how he came to Christ, and then how he led his friend Nabil to Christ. It's like my Roman Empire. It's one of the greatest Christian stories I've ever heard. But glad he's okay. And some parts of the world, even where you might think that you're safe, you could be in danger for preaching the gospel. But it's worth it. There's a book that I read many years ago called Tortured for Christ. It's worth getting and reading and seeing the boldness that people have for their faith, and it challenges you to be better in a world where you think that you have such privileges and cushion, especially here in the US. But that faith, that boldness that they have, I wish it was imparted here. And the love, not just boldness, but love that they had for the people who turned around and tortured them. It's pretty remarkable. But anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation to blacktnews.com, because it does cost to stream and run my website. So if you guys can do that, I appreciate it. You guys can check out different merch available at the store, like this cool black tea mug. And I got different shirts, like this one that says "My Money, My Business," and like this cool Frederick Douglass tee, and so on. I do have different books you guys can also check out. I have 17 that are published. And so there's a link in the description that'll take you to my website, that'll take you to my different social media pages, so you guys can follow different stuff there. There's one that'll take you to like my Amazon page. So if you guys want to check out some of my books, you guys can do that. Anyway, thank you guys. God bless you all, and I will see you tomorrow.